I am not the mole. I am not the mole. I am not the mole. Hello, my name is Liz Ashley, and welcome to my channel, where we have been talking about Netflix stuff for like the past couple weeks now, and that is certainly not going to change today. So today we are going to be reacting to season 1 of The Mole. Now I know, season 2 just ended, and I am going to have a video on that and my reaction because I recorded my reaction as I was watching it. I'm like obsessed with the show. It's so good. It's on Netflix. It's like a reality TV show, but it's also like a game show kind of, and it's so good. So let's get into it. Also, just note that there will be spoilers. So if you haven't watched it yet, there will be some spoilers. Also, if you would like to subscribe to my channel, that'd be great. I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers. I'm getting really close. So if you want to help me out, that would be amazing. All right. So The Mole. I was surprised when I started writing out this, when I started writing out my little outline, because I didn't realize, I kept searching for season 1 The Mole, season 1 The Mole, and it was apparently it was a show way before this, way before now. And so the first season of The Mole aired on ABC in 2001. I was in first grade. It ended in 2005. But apparently the show, even back then, was hosted by news reporters. And so as we get into it, when you watch The Mole, the host is a news reporter. And it's really wild because when I first started watching The Mole and I saw Alex Wagner, I was like, what am I watching? So in season 1, Anderson Cooper was the host. So technically the first season of The Mole on Netflix, season 1 on Netflix, is actually season 6 of The Mole. If you if you got it. Okay. The Mole, season 6, technically season 1 on Netflix, and Alex Wagner was the host. And it was set in Australia, so every season they go to a different country, and so they went to Australia for this one, for season 1. So The Mole is a game show where there's a group of players, because it's technically a game, so this is a game that they're playing, and there is a group of people and they have to figure out the mole. Who in the group was hired to be the mole? And what basically they do, they have all of these different challenges, and those challenges are to get money. And whenever they succeed and get that money, they add the money to the pot. Now the mole, the hired person who's in the group, they have to sabotage these missions and these challenges. And so they don't add as much money to the pot. All right. So now let's talk about all of the players in the game on season 1. So first off, we have Avery. She is actually a professional gamer, and it's funny because one of her YouTube videos came up for me the other day and I was like, oh my God. She's pretty badass. I really liked her. So her main strategy was to watch every detail of every player and spot inconsistencies. Next, we have Casey, and she is just the sweetest person throughout the whole show. But she said main strategy, be silent but deadly, lay low and let others make mistakes and show their emotions. And she said from the sidelines, I would always be watching and listening and learning. So Dom is one of the players. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because I've talked about him in my last 2 videos. This is the show that he's from. So this is the show that he's from. I feel like I'm saying follow the yellow brick road. This is the show that he's from. But this is the show that Dom is from. He was very nice in this show. So nice, really, really nice person. So he said his main strategy, first and foremost, put money in the pot and adjust accordingly. Next, we have Greg, my favorite player. My favorite player of the whole freaking game. He was just funny and amazing. He was my most favorite person on this show. He said his main strategy is not discuss my suspicions with anyone, but still somehow form partnerships to influence group opinions and decision making. We have Jacob, who is from Ohio. and from Ohio. He is not my most favorite person in this game. I liked him at first, and then as it got on, I think he showed too much personality, and I was like, oh, oh, never mind. Never mind. Never mind. So his main strategy is sit back and observe. He said, I can read everyone and watch for their mistakes. And with that strategy, it would cause everyone to be suspicious of me as well, because I'm not trying to be the loudest. It was very true. Everyone was suspicious. I was suspicious. Joy, she is a commercial airline pilot, and this is very important to the story, to the game. She said her main strategy is find another player I trust and join forces with them to identify the mole. She did not do that. She did not do that. All right, and then we have Cassie. Her main strategy is to be a team. What does that say? Okay, so be the team Labrador, like a Labrador retriever. Be the team Labrador, trustworthy, kind, and non-threatening. Osei, so main strategy is be myself, which tends to confuse people anyway. I love that answer. That is my favorite answer. Pranav, let's see, his main strategy, he said, in preparing for the game, I focused on developing skills that could have helped me understand the player's motives and actions in real time so that I could be appropriately reactive. But 4 eyes are better than 2. There's a lot of information to take in, and having a person or two that you choose to trust early on could bode well as the game develops. Yes and no, and he learns that. Tamara, her main strategy is to form relationships with people and allow them to trust me. Sandy, her main strategy is stay true to myself. Don't speak or give out more information than needed to other players. I want to stay very vague and suspicious. She does that very well. Okay, last person. This is the last person. His name is Will. His main strategy, he said, my voting process. I am not going to vote for specifically one person. So I think I forgot to say it in the little like game summary, but every time, like every week, so basically what they do is they watch everyone, they try to figure out who the mole is, and every like, week or whatever, I don't know the time frame, but they take this quiz on who the mole is. And if you get, it's like a regular, like, if you fail the quiz, then you leave. So it's wild because you got to really pay attention to like everyone around you and what they're doing. And then people try to trick people into thinking they're the mole when they're not, so that they'll go home. It's wild. As you can tell, not a big fan of him. I did like him at first when I first watched this, and then I saw him on Perfect Match, and I was like, ew. Yeah. Now let's get into the challenges and just like first thoughts about players. So from the very beginning, I thought that Joy was the mole. She's the commercial airline pilot, and I'll tell you why. But I thought Joy was the mole from the very beginning. That's who I thought it was, and that's who a lot of people thought it was, because she just kept messing everything up. And so that was basically my guess. But all right, so let's talk about the first challenge. So the first challenge is where they get like dropped off in this forest, and they have to find this like abandoned plane in the middle of a forest. And they all like find each other and meet each other. And then Alex Wagner, that's when they meet her as well. Were they able to finish the first one? I don't think they were. So basically, if they finish and they accomplish their mission, then they get money put in the pot. And I think what happened was only 2 teams successfully did their mission. So they all went in 3 different teams. And Joy's team was the only team that did not win. And so a lot of people started getting suspicious of her then, because she said she was a commercial airline pilot, which she is, but she couldn't read a map. And this is like a freaking theme throughout the whole show. She cannot read a map. She can't read a map at all, like whatsoever, which is really weird and really strange. And so everyone was like, okay, how can you be a pilot and not read a map? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so that's how we got here.
Because I'm a pilot, I'm good at navigation. They're going to rely on me. So we were going in the wrong direction. Like over here somewhere has to be. This is the river, right? Now, I don't even know how far east we're supposed to walk. I think we probably went too far. We've all been weary of Joy and her ability to work with maps.
Once again in the game, Joy has messed up with a map.
You would think a pilot would be able to read a very simple map.
I thought giving the map to the pilot was the best decision, but turns out we got lost anyway.
Joy is supposed to be, our Dora the Explorer, and we ain't exploring it.
It's over here somewhere. Not again.
And so they have their first challenge, and then they have to spend the night in the forest. And so there is a bag, there's like the bags of money that they won in the plane. In the middle of the night, somebody goes in and takes the money and basically misplaces it. Like one of the bags of money misplaces it. Now, mind you, they only have two because Joy's team didn't win the first challenge. And so when everyone woke up and there was only one bag, everyone was freaking out and they had to go look for it, and it was like a whole thing. Now, Will and Dom looked for it together. This becomes relevant. They went and they looked for it together. And so eventually everyone gave up. They could not find this other bag of money. So Alex Wagner came and she was like, "It looks like the mole sabotaged you in the middle of the night." And they're like, "But luckily we have a video of what happened, and it was Will who ended up doing it." Now, was Will the mole?
Never doubted me. Bro, I just don't know what I just saw.
Look, of course that put like some stink on him, but you know, he had to be like, "No, I'm not the mole. Like, I did that because they gave him a challenge. Like, you can win some money if you like hide this successfully and no one can find it." So he actually, when he did that, he did risk their money, but he did win them more. I never suspected Will at all, really, truly. Because he just seemed like he was in it for the game and for the money. And so I never suspected Will as the mole. But this is important because Dom was like, "What? I thought we were having a bromance." And he thought that like Will betrayed him or something, but then he got over it when he won them more money. But of course they don't like each other anymore, and you'll see why in a second in one of these challenges. But they ended up taking a quiz, you know, after that, and the first person to go was Osei, which is really sad because he was really cool. He seemed really cool and really nice and really chill, but he ended up going home first, so he wasn't even able to get to like this mansion that they got in Australia. They always stay in these like big mansions. All right, so that was the first challenge. So the second challenge was actually they had to break out of a prison, which was kind of cool, and then they had to pick two people to be like the leaders, I guess, and they stayed back while the two other teams went in and had to get themselves out of these like lock cells. So all three of them were in different cells and they had to get themselves out. Now, during this, Sandy and Samara started looking a little suspicious because they lied about not seeing some of the clues. And so there are clues within the cell, there are clues with outside of the cell, and they had to figure out how to get themselves out. It was really freaking cool. It was so cool. Joy also made herself look suspicious because she was not urgent in wanting to get this done at all. She was doing push-ups like in the middle of the freaking thing. It was so weird. Like, it was so weird. And Cassie messed up too, and she lied about not seeing something too. But Joy was just so overly just like obvious about like not actually caring at all. And so it was really weird. Like about not finishing at all. So she was like that's why she continued to be my like suspect. But they did end up getting this challenge. So Dom and Casey were the two people who stayed back and weren't in the cells. During the challenge, you know, the people in the cells only get so much time that they can use to get out of it, right? To figure out how to get out of the cell. And so during them trying to get out, Alex Wagner came up to Dom and Casey and was like, "Hey, you know, if we take away 10 minutes of their time without them even knowing, you get more money into the pot." Casey didn't want to do it. Dom did. And they ended up doing it. So they took 10 minutes out of their time. But they did end up winning. It was very, very close. The team with Cassie got very, very close to not making it. But they did make it, and they ended up winning. So they ended up winning that one. But they still had to take the quiz, and guess who the mole was, and Samara ended up getting eliminated. Then they have their first like exemption challenge thing. So throughout the game, you can actually get exemptions, but when you get exemptions, you have to bid using the money in the pot. And so any player can bid to get an exemption. And so in this first round, Joy bids like almost all of their money, like nearly all of their money, like nearly all of their money.
You've lost 30 grand.
What?
And so, of course, this puts a target on her back very, very early on. And this is also somewhat suspicious because even though she's getting the exemption, she's taking the exemption away from another person and she's draining the pot of all the money, which is something the mole would do. And so everyone is pretty much like, oh, what? Like, no, there's no way. And they, like, most people are just like really upset with her and really don't like her. And so this from the very beginning is how Joy kind of becomes most people's main suspect as being the mole. So the third challenge is another like airplane diving sunken treasure mission challenge. So basically they are on this island and there's one team that has to find the treasure in the ocean. There's one team that's in a plane trying to find like items, trying to find like, I forgot what they had to look for, but they had to look for something like items on the I don't remember, but it was to like help them build a raft or help them get to this buoy where they would, you know, end the mission. And then there was another team that built the raft. There are people in each group that are purposely sabotaging on purpose. They're purposely sabotaging these things because they want to look suspicious. They want to look suspicious because they want people to think that they're the mole, because if they're not, then they can get that person to vote on them and then that person will leave, making them closer to winning the money in the end. And so there are a few people who make big mistakes during this on purpose so that way they look suspicious. One of them being Avery. Now, Avery, they have, you know, little talking heads, and Avery in her talking head mentions that this is actually her strategy, that she is going to mess up things so that people think she's the mole and then they will go home. Now, something that becomes very apparent is that her and Pranav, they become friends and they become sharing stuff with each other. And so, but I think she kind of shares this with him, but not really. Like they talk about it a little bit. But what she doesn't share is that she's going to just like blindly make all these mistakes, you know, just like make all these mistakes. So that's something she does not tell him. That's something she doesn't really share with him. Which is going to be important later. But during this challenge, Avery just like, there's one point where they're bringing oxygen tanks to the people who are diving in the ocean. And that's probably, I think, what they were looking for in the plane. But anyway, they're bringing it to them and she just drops it. She just drops it and keeps walking. It's like so obvious. It's so wild.
This is horrid. Oh, that's so heavy. No one is trustworthy in this game.
So a lot of people do pick up on her just being like obviously trying to like double bluff, but did they make this challenge? I don't remember if they made this challenge. I'm getting the two different seasons mixed up in my head now. I'm getting them mixed up, but Kasi also didn't see, like Avery and Kasi both in the airplane looked out the window and said they didn't see something when there was obviously something there. So it took them longer in the plane. So when they got down to like help people and give the oxygen tanks to the divers, it wasn't like it took up a lot of time. So at the end of that one, when they took the quiz, Dom ended up going home, which I was sad about. But something that they do in the next episode, which I didn't realize, I think is something they just always done. But so something that they do in the next episode is a little different though. So they take the whole group into this bar and they tell them, you know, oh, it's just gonna be chill, whatever. But actually they get a text saying, hey, do you want to bring Dom back? If you want to bring Dom back, he's in this car and he is like locked in this car and he has to figure out what the bumper sticker on the back of that car says. And if he can figure it out in this amount of time, then, you know, he can get back in the game. Now, the players, of course, could help them. So that's the whole point, is that, you know, they were offered the chance to go out there, see what it says, and then tell him. Well, you know, a lot of people liked Dom, and when he left, a lot of people were really sad because, like I said, he was very nice in this show. And it's wild because there were a couple people who were like, yeah, we want him back. Yes. And then Sandy was the first one to be like, no, I don't want him back at all, because that's another person we have to get out of the game again. And he knows who's not the mole because he lost, he left. And so all the answers that he answered for a certain person obviously weren't correct. So he got one person out of the way. He knows one person is not the mole. So I don't want to bring him back. Now, again, there's a good amount of people who say they want him back. Will, someone who he said he had like a bromance with, said no. So I think that's where that whole Dom Will beef came in. Even though they said they squashed it during Perfect Match, which I don't think they did, because Will was very gross in that show. And like, yeah. And even though Dom's friends with Harry, it's a whole thing. I have videos on it. But anyway, so he did not come back. But Sandy, it was funny because a lot of people thought she was like this really nice person, and she was a little suspicious because she would mess up, but like she was, pretty nice for the most part. And so she just kind of turned on it, like turned very quick during that challenge. But they did not bring him back, which if they do bring, which they do this in the second season and it turns out a little bit different. And then they have to have a double elimination like down the line. So that's how that would work if they did bring him back. So the fourth challenge, which is a bank heist, which is really cool. So it was really cool. They were in two different teams, and Pranav was one team where they had to like find all this money, but it was all foreign money, and they had to calculate what it would be in US dollars, and they had to get the perfect amount. And then Kasi, they had to find, there was like this log number of all these people who have are they PO boxes or lock boxes or whatever? I don't know. I obviously don't need one. But Kasi was in charge of that team, and they had to go through these clues, and they had to find what was in these lock boxes. Now, Kasi and Pranav were in a separate room, and so they just had to communicate with them. They couldn't like help them in real time. They just had clues, and they had to help them. Now, Pranav was very helpful, and unfortunately that team did not succeed because they weren't able to convert it correctly. They were over the specific amount that they had to like turn in, so they did not succeed. And neither did the other team. Now, the other team, it was really wild because in the middle of it, Kasi just kind of like gave up. She just like gave up and was like, I don't know. I don't see any pattern. I don't know what this logbook means. I don't know. And so the whole team had to go through every lockbox when there was too many lockbox, and it was just too much. But she kind of just gave up, which was when I started getting a little bit suspicious of her, because she's a software engineer. So it's like, I feel like she's smarter than that. And she is. And so it's kind of weird that she didn't see it. Like, they had to look for names that had associations with gold. And I forgot the specific names, but they were like pretty obvious. And she just didn't even read out those names either. So that was a little weird. That is when a lot of people started suspecting her.
All right, we are in. We have 3 key rings, and we have a ton of like lock boxes.
Does she have any clues for us?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have any clues for us on your end?
First lockbox, junk. Second one, junk. Third one, nicer junk.
It's just so frustrating. We just couldn't figure out how to move forward. What did we miss?
There were names on the list that had associations with gold. K. Midas. King Midas. G. Locks. Goldie Locks. L. Dorado.
They both did not win that one. So that one they did not win, which sucks because Joy just took all the money out of the pot, and now they have like no money. So there you go. They also could have got money if they brought Dom back, but they decided not to do that either. And so they just don't have a lot of money right now in the pot. But they had a quiz, and the person who went home, so the fourth person eliminated was Sandy. So that, it's funny because Will was always suspicious of someone. And then as the minute he was suspicious of them, they would go home like the next day, which is hilarious. I don't know how he kept winning those quizzes, but I guess because he went with this strategy of just like spacing it out. He spaced it out between people. The fifth challenge was a mail delivery mission. And so there are 3 different teams, and one team was biking and getting mail. The next team was on a train and getting mail. And then And then the last team was, no, one team was walking and getting mail, and eventually they bike. The other team was in a car getting mail. And then the third team was in a train getting mail. And each one had specific challenges to them. Now, the one in the car was Joy and Jacob. And Joy, again, so Jacob was driving because he said he could drive fast. And then Joy was on the map. She was the one with the map. Now, what do you think? Was she able to read a map in a car? No, she was not. Again, she's a commercial pilot. She was not able to read a map. My dad is a pilot. He knows how to read maps. All right. Anyway, so that was very suspicious. But then in the walking, it was Avery, Pranav, and Will. And like, Avery just was like, she just like gave up. Now, I think personally it was because she really like had trouble doing it because it was a long walk, but eventually they were able to get bikes. Now they had to take money out of the pot to be able to use those bikes, but they did get those bikes. And so because of that, they actually did succeed. So Avery, Pranav, and Will succeeded, but Avery made herself look very suspicious. And remember, Pranav did not know that she was purposely making herself look so suspicious. So that's something to know. And then Joy and Jacob were in the car and she could not read the map, but they lost. So they did not win. They were the ones who lost the challenge. So Avery, Will, and Pranav brought in money. Joy and Jacob didn't. So again, very suspicious. And then on the train, it was Greg, Cassie, and Casey. And Casey and Greg were like giving it their all. Greg was doing amazing and he was like leading it and he was doing great, right? Amazing. I was like, oh my God, I love Greg. He was doing great. And then Cassie was like the one person who kind of like effed up and didn't get the bag. Didn't get the bag of mail when they had to try to get it. So that was also very suspicious.
It's awful. That feeling of letting your team down, but no, it was a complete accident.
But then later on afterwards, they had another challenge to get an exemption. Now, you could win money, you could win the exemption, but that's what they had the choices for if you won this bomb dinner. So they had the bomb dinner, and something that Will mentioned in his talking head from the very beginning is that he was going to pretend, even if he had the bad food, he was going to pretend like he had the good food because he wanted the exemption. They had like a round of food and then they had to vote people off who they thought, you know, had the good food or whatever. Was it the good food or the bad food? So basically, if you had the bad food, you weren't on a detonator. But if you had the good food, you were on a detonator. If you had the good food, you were on a detonator. If you had the bad food, you weren't on a detonator. Okay, that's what it is. So Cassie was on a detonator and she had the good food, but she made it seem like she had the bad food, and so they voted her out and a bomb went off. And so that meant that if they let another person that was on a detonator leave, if they eliminated another person on a detonator, then they wouldn't be able to get any money and they couldn't go any longer. Now, they did get down to just Joy. So it was just Joy and Will. Now, Joy had the bad food, and so she was able to get up and move around. Will had the good food, so he was on the detonator, and so Joy then had the chance of getting the money and putting that in the pot or getting an exemption. Now, if we remember Joy's track record, she spent all of their money. She bid all of their money to get that exemption in the first place. But this time she did pick putting money in the pot, which was crazy because it was crazy because everyone expected her not to do that, which I certainly was not expecting her to do that, but she did. And so she actually did good. And I think that's when people started like being like, okay, maybe she's not the mole, you know, people started like questioning her because she was then now being a team player. So I think that was kind of her strategy of be really suspicious, but then be a team player so that people are just confused about her. After that challenge, after that little challenge and the mail challenge, they did have to take a quiz. And now remember, Pranav, he was with Avery on the mail challenge and she was being very suspicious. And she did not tell him that she was trying to be suspicious, even though they were sharing everything else. And so he kind of started thinking she might be the mole. So he got eliminated. So the 5th elimination was Pranav. All right, so the 6th challenge was the mountaineering mission challenge. So they literally had to like go down this mountain with bags of money. So they all had bags of money on their back, and each one of them had a certain amount in it. And there were some that had money, but some that didn't. And so they didn't know who it was. The mole picked the bags and who had the bags. So the mole knew who had what bags. Now, Greg and Kasi stayed back. Kasi like kind of volunteered to stay back, and Greg was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, you know, I can be with Kasi and learn more about her one-on-one. And so they were not a part of the mission. They stayed up, and it was like a thing, I don't know. Anyway, but they all, you know, they have communication and they talk on walkie-talkies throughout. And so as they go down this mountain, they had to like bungee and all this stuff. It was crazy. And Casey was very scared, and it was like really hard for her. And so a lot of people started being suspicious of Casey at this point, specifically Will. Which you'll see his pattern, but specifically Will. And everyone was going down the mountain, and they had to kind of think like, what would the mole think? How would the mole think? What would the mole do, right? And so everyone was like, well, Will's like the most athletic. He's the one who would most be good at this. And so maybe we should take Will out. Maybe Will shouldn't be a part of this, because, you know, they would think that we would want Will in this challenge because he's the athletic one, and they would not put money in his bag. And so Will was not happy about this. He was very upset because he gets very controlling over the game, and like kind of wants to do everything his way, but he got voted out. And so, you know, even though he didn't like it, he was voted out, and they all went down. And there were three people that had bags with money, and no one else did. Now, only 2 people made it down with the bags of money. Kasi had one of the bags of money. Greg did not, but Kasi did. And so I think it was like Avery that had a bag of money and Casey that had a bag of money. So they did win some.
The mole has decided which 3 of those backpacks have cash.
I'll do it because I feel like maybe I don't have the money in my bag.
So do you want to stay here?
Okay.
10,000 or not?
So after the mountaineering mission, they had a caged up mission, a chained up mission. So they had to do all this mountaineering, and then they ended up going to this like abandoned warehouse, and they were all chained up, and they had to put the one that they trusted the most at the beginning of the line so they could get the key and unchain everybody else. They chose Kasi. Kasi unchained herself, took the exemption, went to hotel, while the rest of them had to stay there and be chained up and stay in that abandoned warehouse until the next day. Everyone was very upset with Kasi, and that's when she became more of a suspect.
In your next mission, you will be chained together, possibly all night. Wait, what? Wow. Here is what's going to happen. In this cage, there is a key, and that key will unlock all of your padlocks. Every 10 minutes, the cage will open, and one player will have exactly 1 minute to grab the key and free themselves from your chain gang. If anyone does take the exemption, the challenge will stop immediately, and the group earns no money. And everyone left here will sleep here. Woohoo! Started us off strong.
This is the easiest 20 grand, y'all.
$20,000.
Now, they took the quiz again, and of course, in Will's pattern of being suspicious of people, Casey ended up going home, which really sucks because she was really cool and really nice. She seemed really great. She was just like her little bio said. She was very nice. She did lay low and kind of observe people and talk to people. And so, you know, no one was really ever suspect of her because she was always a team player. So this next challenge, I think, is my favorite challenge. So it was spot the fake in 2 truths and a lie. So they had to spot like a fake painting, and whoever got it right was on one team, and whoever got it wrong was on another team. And so whoever got it right, they went on this little excursion, right? And 2 people had like crazy nights where they did something crazy, and then one person just went back to the hotel. So it was Joy, Avery, and Jacob that won. And so they went to do that. And then the other team had no idea what they did that night and had to come in the next day and hear their stories and decide who was telling the truth and who was telling a lie. Greg, Cassie, and Will who had to determine that. And so they all sit down and Joy's like, oh, I had a snake. I had to hold this python. And then Avery's like, I walked on coals. And then Jacob's like, I sat in this like abandoned building and got this like worm or whatever to eat. It was very bizarre. Jacob was obviously lying. Joy and Avery were not, and they guessed correctly, but Cassie kept trying to get them, like, she really didn't believe Joy, which is understandable. But Greg was like, no, I know. He's like, I know that Jacob is lying. I freaking love Greg, man. I love Greg. He's the best. But he was right. He was right. Unfortunately, Greg did go home. Greg did end up going home, and that's because at the very end, Joy was like accusing Jacob of being the mole, and Greg kind of fell for it because he was one of his suspects, even though he had been voting for Cassie and kind of Joy the whole time. And was doing good, but then when Joy kind of put it back on Jacob, it was like a whole thing. And she did that on purpose to mess people up, and she did end up messing Greg up. But then, so the 8th challenge was a pigeon pizza delivery mission. And so Avery got like kidnapped and had to be in this like cage, and in this bird cage, and they had to find these different clues to figure out where she was. So there were 2 different teams. There was Joy and there was Cassie, and then there was Will and there was Jacob. And Will and Jacob, they had a really hard time trying to figure it out. But that's because Avery missed like a phone number. Joy and Cassie ended up making it and ended up making the money, but Cassie was messing up a lot, like more than Joy, which was really kind of weird for me because Joy was so determined to put money in the pot because she just took a lot, but she was so determined to put money in the pot. And Cassie was like picking the wrong bird because they had to find the perfect image of this bird, and they had to pick that bird, and that bird was going to take them to where Avery is. And Cassie kept picking the wrong bird and was like really adamant about picking the wrong bird. Luckily, Joy got her way and they got there and they won that money. But yeah, it was just kind of wild. And then Will and Jacob did not make it, I don't believe, because of Avery not seeing the number, which made them look at Avery kind of weird again and even more suspicious, which Jacob ended up leaving that night in elimination because he was a little suspect of Avery. All right, the 9th challenge. So now we're getting down to like 4 people. So it's Cassie, Will, Avery, and Joy. And so there's a sledding and briefcase challenge. So they have to go up this hill sledding, and they have to put all these briefcases of money on their sled and bring it up this hill, and which is really hard because it gets really, really heavy. And it's Will and Avery on one team and Joy and Cassie on another. Avery was just getting very tired, and I think she did sabotage a little bit, but for the most part, her and Will worked like really, really hard, and they got up there with most of the money. Cassie and Joy did not. Like they got, I mean, I think they still got up there, but it took them much longer. And Cassie just like blatantly threw briefcases just blatantly threw them around. So by the time they got up to the top, Joy was like, where are the briefcases? What is happening? Yeah, it was wild. It was wild. Joy just kind of thought, I don't know. Joy kind of gave Cassie the benefit of the doubt. But Joy was always very suspect of Will. I was never suspect of Will. He just seemed very determined to win. Avery was suspect of Joy, I think. And Will was suspect of Cassie and Joy. Cassie was suspect of Joy. And so she wanted to see if Joy was going to react to her throwing the briefcases off. And obviously she didn't until they got up there, which is weird because you would think you would feel that if you're like dragging it up. Anyway, before they take the quiz, they have to bet on these briefcases, and they can add more money to the pot, but they have to guess who's gonna leave. And so they made a guess. One briefcase had 0, and they decided that Avery was gonna get the zero thing. So that way, if Avery left, they they would have 3 people who added money to the pot. But at the very last minute, Kasi was like, no, I want the 0. I want the 0 briefcase. And Avery's like, we already talked about this. I'm not confident in the test. I want the 0 briefcase because I'm not confident in the test today. And Kasi was like, no, I want it. So they ended up switching at the very last minute, and guess who went home? Avery. And Kasi stays. So now it's just 3. It's like the finale, and there's just 3 people, and it's Kasi, Joy, and Will. And they have to go through this like fortress mission where they have to like suction cup themselves to the walls, and like they can't get seen by these drones, and it's really wild. And like every single one of them messes up because this is like a theme. They all want to seem suspicious. So that way, this very last quiz, they can win. They want to get the last person out. And they all made themselves look suspicious on purpose. So Will was suspicious of Kasi. Joy was suspicious of Will, and Kasi was suspicious of Joy. So that's where we are at the end of this. I was very stuck because I didn't think Will was the mole. I thought it was either Joy or Kasi. So I kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then, everyone comes back. It's like a little reunion, and they announce who the mole is, and they announce who the winner is. And the winner who has ever got the most questions right about the mole in the very last quiz. And I'm sitting there and I'm losing my mind, and I'm like, oh my God, Will has this smirk on his face, and I'm like, what is happening? And, at the very end, I was like, I think it's Kasi. But the whole time I thought it was Joy. But at the very end, I was like, maybe it is Kasi because Joy seemed like she really cared in this last challenge. And lo and behold, it was Kasi. And like no one suspected her because she was so nice and so like non-threatening. But then at the very end, she started like deliberately just really like messing up. And so she was the mole. Kasi was the mole. And then Will, of course, ended up winning because he was the one who suspected Kasi and Joy did not. So Will won, which, I mean, cool, I guess. I don't know. I don't really like him anymore. But out of all the players, Kasi had the most sabotages. So she was successful. And so she had 11 sabotages. The next highest were Greg and Avery for 6. And then Joy at 5, which is funny because the whole time you really think Joy's just like effing up all the time. But she's really not. I think it might have been the editing or whatever. But yeah. So yeah, that's The Mole season 1. It was really good. This video is going to be much longer than normal. Some of this is probably not in order. I looked at Wikipedia, I looked at Reddit, I looked at a lot of different places, and I went on Netflix and like wrote it down, but I think I'm misremembering some of these. So they might not be in order, but that is the video. Tell me what you think about The Mole below. I'm going to do season 2 because I just finished watching it. So I am going to do season 2. And yeah, and don't forget to like and subscribe and all the things. And I will see you next week. Bye.